Hello and welcome back. I made a video talking about the difference in official typings and themes. In that video I used pie charts to hypothetically display their breakdown of types. So in that framework we know that Game Freak made the base form Charizard Fire Flying type, and we know that from looking at Charizard that it's physiologically a dragon. More flexibility with types and themes allows design teams to inject as many inspirations, moves, abilities, and aesthetics into Pokemon as they want into future designs. Now even though this topic was originally just for the sake of an example, people really liked the visualization of a pie chart. By popular demand, I'll try to give a ballpark of what latent type affinities a Pokemon has using the same hypothetical framework. This is not the first in the series, so you'll probably be confused if you start here. I'd recommend going back and looking at these previous videos for more context. I should also note, this isn't an Ancestry.com breakdown of every Pokemon. The numbers and percentages on the pie chart are just for easy ballpark visualization or placeholders for types and themes. Is it a lot or a little? Is it even or uneven? Simple, broad strokes answers. It's kind of like how a guy who is mostly Italian and German will probably just leave it at, I'm half Italian and half German. Now maybe upon closer inspection he notices his middle name is different from standard German. Maybe he finds out it's a Swiss-German spelling and he finds out that he's like 20% Swiss. That's now reasonable to discuss or represent on the pie chart because there's some substance there. There's intrigue or a potential story. However, it would be a little silly for us to waste the effort to put 1% African on the pie chart because all people come from Africa or something like that. So don't go out there quoting me like this is canon or as if I'm the authority on this topic. It's just a fun, hypothetical exercise. Capiche? The past videos in the series cover the concept, and people using that concept would be able to use pattern recognition to deduce pie charts for the rest of the Pokemon. It's kind of like how after you learn your 12 by 12 multiplication chart, you can just multiply things on your own. At this point, the rest of the series is likely just going to be a highlight reel of Pokemon that I feel like talking about because they have some interesting ramifications to me, or me mentioning a really obvious fan favorite opinion because it's kind of obligatory to mention. Sometimes we like to just hear someone tell us stuff we already know or could easily work out ourselves. It's okay, I do it too. That's why I still listen to Fault Swipe Gaming's Pokemon competitive history videos while driving, even though I'm old enough to have experienced the entire competitive history of a bunch of those Pokemon. Kicking off Generation 2, we have Meganium. I have to bring it up. This is a Pokemon that always ends up being an honorary mention because it's a serviceably average monotype starter. It's monotype, so people want to try and add a type. We didn't have a grass dragon type for a while, so people wanted to check off the box on that. It's more reptile-like, a dinosaur, so a dragon to some. It's the usual tried and true Pokemon type discussion topic. The dragon type is like cheese on food. From the early 2000s to even now in the 2020s, people are going to endlessly try to put it on everything and act like it's new. The introduction of fairies and Mega Evolution reawakened the habit, so people naturally talked about Fairy Meganium because it's cute, smells good, has a pink flower, and heals people. I guess if dragon is like cheese, then fairy is like bacon. They're good and popular, and they're the first thing people add to jazz something up. Well, I'm leaning into the fan service and calling Meganium about 50% grass, 25% dragon, and 25% fairy. Since dragon and fairy are tied, there is no second most dominant type, so that's why it's mono grass. Game Freak recently leaned into the fan service and made a grass fairy Mega Meganium. The Meganiumite probably amplifies the fairy in Meganium enough to manifest the second typing. Data on Mega Meganium mentions that it is larger and more efficient at seeking out and storing solar energy for better photosynthesis. This is probably why it's just a really efficient grass type as opposed to having fire typing added. I'd say that Mega Meganium still has the same latent types, just more fairy than dragon. Again, just a guess. If we get a Meganiumite Z that made Meganium Grass Dragon, then we'd have some actual confirmation rather than speculation in our hands. It would be like the case of Mega Charizard X confirming that there was a latent dragon typing under the hood. Actually, another possible connection crossed my mind and I had to look into it. Many cultural superstitions attribute power to plants that act as food or medicine. Most folks have already figured that Meganium had something to do with geraniums because of the reddish pink flower, the grass typing, and the name. It's not really rocket science. A ton of us probably made the connection from the start, even if we didn't have internet access to Google and check the Japanese name for the name origin. According to my copy of Desk Reference to Nature's Medicine, geraniums, like many flowers, have helpful properties when made into teas and pastes. People historically used them for wounds, bowels, and menstrual bleeding. In modern day, we have confirmed that they do have antiseptic and anti-inflammatory properties, but they aren't recommended because we have better options now. This was good information to explain the grass typing and the healing back in 2006, but now we have the fairy type added, so we can look at it again from a fairy tale lens. Looking into it, I didn't find anything extremely unique. Geraniums can, depending on the color, represent fortune, courage, gentleness, strength, good health, and luck. They can also ward off evil spirits and generally protect people. Tons of flowers and foods follow these superstitions and themes, but hey, it adds something to Meganium's grass and fairy typing. Meganium even has the cool details where each neck flower could correspond to existing geranium colors, and the flared leaf leg cuff ruffles could match the leaves of geraniums. Last bit of trivia, but the leaves of a geranium allegedly have essential oils that can repel mosquitoes, since some variations can smell astringent or like citrus. Even if this is all coincidence, it's a pretty cool coincidence. In the case of Feraligatr, I'm kind of at a loss here. I really want to say something more than it's a reptile so it's a dragon, because in the early 2000s some people really did try to justify suggestions of a dragon type with it's a reptile. It is a gator and a croc, so it is a reptile. It now mega evolves into a water dragon, and the reasoning is just kinda because Papa Game Freak said so. It's another case where a Megastone brings out a physiological change or latent power that just makes it dragon type with dragon skin. Mega Feraligatr would have a pie chart that is basically just half water and half dragon. Arguably a dragon type with Dragon Eyes ability, and enough extra scales to make a toilet seat gator skull is a bit more dragony, but that's just splitting hairs at this point. We'll just say Mega Feraligatr is 60% dragon and 40% water. That Megastone did some heavy lifting to make this a dragon. For real, if not for Legends ZA doing all this, Feraligatr would have been skipped entirely because reptile equals dragon type is kind of a boring thing to say. Base form Feraligatr is mostly water. Apparently there's dragon in there, but it's probably suppressed by all that cake it's dragging around. Another fan favorite is Noctowl. Unlike many of the normal flying type birds we had before and after it, Noctowl has always done occult, psychic, or ghost type things in the games and other media. Many Pokemon get moves like Confusion or Psychic as coverage, but similar to Golduck, Noctowl gets enough of the really fringe and specialized psychic type moves that it really feels like a Pokemon from the psychic type and ghost type families. Dream Eaters, Stored Power, Imprison, Nightshade, Psychic Noise, Spite, Confuse Ray, Skill Swap, and moves like that. I'm aware some other non-psychic or non-ghost Pokemon like Butterfree or Yanma can get one or two of these less common moves, but Noctowl has all of them like a proper psychic would. This all makes sense because owls are associated with the night and being occult night birds. They're silent and dive around at night, which is probably freaky and startling to people. Noctowl is mostly normal flying, and so let's squeeze that psychic and ghost onto that chart and move on. Stantler is in basically the same situation as Noctowl. It's another normal type that does weird psychic and ghost type things that makes people forget that they aren't ghost or psychic at all. It's as if they felt like the Generation 1 normal type was just the equivalent of a JRPG's basic attacks, and that too many Generation 1 normal types were just physical attackers with random spells. Kind of like how classes such as monks or knights might have mostly physical attacks, but have one random elemental attack so that they aren't completely useless when basic attacks don't work. Maybe in Generation 2 they wanted to include normal types that felt more like they are more magical oriented. You're using magic because of the fighting style and stats, not necessarily for coverage or super effective damage. Like Noctowl, Stantler gets a ton of psychic type moves, and it has a lot of data about illusions and mystic sensations. It even has Frisk as an ability which, despite the English name, is not actually an ability that involves patting down the opponent like the police or security. The original Japanese name, Unobstructed Sight, implies it's more like magically knowing what the opponent is holding, like a magical X-ray vision. Where Stantler really differs from Noctowl is that it gained a new evolution in Ancient Hisui, which, now that I say that out loud, sounds absurd to say. Weirdeer is a normal psychic type that gives us the closure we all wanted. Stantler was a normal type with weirdo magic, and it was psychic all along somewhere deep inside. You know the deal. Stantler is mostly normal type, and like many other occult Pokemon, psychic and ghost are tied. Then it evolves and psychic becomes more dominant than ghost and manifests as a proper second type. Ampharos and Mega Ampharos are kind of like a mix of the conversation behind Meganium and Feraligatr. Like, what do I even say here? This line is obviously based on sheep and then gradually stops being a sheep until it no longer has as much wool. Pokemon design has changed a lot over the years, but recognize that back then, especially in Generation 1 and 2, some mammalian Pokemon looked a little like fuzzy dinosaurs. If you went back in time to the year 2000 and showed me Mega Ampharos saying that it had another type, I'd think that they added a light type in the future because they gave Ampharos a bunch of extra orbs. Heck, when I first saw Mega Ampharos, I thought this was pure electric or they added fairy or normal, since light is just a theme, not a type. Guess they weren't sheep horns. They were dragon horns the whole time. It's dragon because Mega Evolution stimulates and brings out a vestigial dragon typing from its lineage. No, for real. This is not me hypothesizing this for the thought experiment, this time it's actually canon. Game Freak needed to give us English speakers context for how we got a dragon sheep, so in the Pokedex entries they explicitly say that Mega Evolution stimulates the genes and cells of Ampharos to grow back wool and a vestigial dragon typing that it normally doesn't express. They had to explain and justify this because before then all data and lore for this Pokemon for nearly 20 years was exclusively Ampharos is a lighthouse beacon and everyone likes that. Again, that's at least from the perspective of English speakers. For Japanese speakers, it's easier for them to have realized that this thing was a dragon because dragon is in the name for them. See? Right there. Denryu can be a current, but Ryu can be a dragon too. 10 years in the lighthouse made Denryu a sheep, but the Megastone makes it like a dragon. Honorable mention to Bellosom. It just seems like a pure grass type that really likes the sun and dances when it's happy in the sun. Most of the Pokedex entries talk about their dances in a way that correlates with a lot of sun, but never outright confirms that the dance is causation. It seems for now that it could be a species that dances in anticipation or in celebration of sun without being able to actually cause the sun to appear. This is of course not counting the use of Sunny Day, as Pokemon lore does sometimes make a distinction between a Pokemon using moves or abilities to change the weather versus Pokemon that change the weather without using a move or ability. It's probably mostly grass or maybe even 100% grass. However, I do want to acknowledge that depending on how you look at it and depending on what information we get in the future, I could understand if people saw other latent types in there. So I'm displaying a pie chart here that includes and acknowledges arguments people could make. Maybe the poison it had from prior forms is suppressed. Maybe the Sunstone in evolution gave it some potential affinity for fire or fairy. It's just a thought. I'm personally more invested in that deliciously free second ability slot, and I think that the Dancer ability would fit there perfectly, but that's a conversation for another video. Gligar and Gliscor are pretty horrifying when you think about it. Sure, they're ground flying types, but they are also a pair of child and adult-sized venomous gliding scorpions. The chitinous bug-like shell scaled up to our size would be a pain to deal with, and both species are immune to poison. From Gligar to Gliscor, it could be argued that the latent poison typing grows because it goes from an immunity to all external poison to the ability to poison heal. Gligar and Gliscor are mostly ground and flying. Gliscor's ratio probably just shifts power from bug and more into poison. Misdreavus and Mismagius are pure ghost types, but their sinister nature and telekinetic abilities arguably could represent some kind of dark and psychic affinities hidden in there. A bunch of these occult types do similar things and act like a family of sibling types, which is a pattern you probably realize at this point. The addition of fairy type, especially all the fairy type tricksters that act like magical nuisances, work particularly well for this evolution line. Mismagius Pokedex entries and depictions constantly talk about incantations they make for spells to cause suffering and occasionally even benefits. The existence of Fluttermane as a ghost fairy type ancient ancestor or parallel multiversal version of this evolutionary line really helps make the argument for a latent fairy typing. It's hard to say if the sinister and underhanded behavior is the fault of ghost and fairy tendencies, or if there is still dark in there. When we have no evidence, we just include possibilities. So we'll just say it's mostly ghost. Psychic, dark, and fairy, or some other pairing of these are tied. Sudowoodo is 100% just a rock, or at least 100% not a plant. It's a subversion Pokemon, and its whole gimmick is that it disguises itself as a tree for defense so that other Pokemon ignore it and don't attack. This should work because the things that don't eat plants walk past. The things that would eat plants, like a bug type or the many normal types that graze, aren't going to harm a rock type or enjoy biting a rock. The sad joke is that as a rock type it despises water, so helpful humans and their partner Pokemon will attempt to water what they think is a plant, causing it to suffer. For some reason, I've heard adults who grew up with this Pokemon still miss the point and suggest that it should be a grass type. Living proof that media literacy and literacy were a problem before cell phones and TikTok, though they certainly did not help with that. I figure I may as well clear up the misconception while we're here. Yanma and Yanmega are bug and flying dragonflies. I absolutely understand why people would want a dragon typing because it would be exciting, and it would check off that bug dragon box we've waited so long to check off. Yanmega could have been a bug dragon prehistoric dragonfly. It would make more sense as a dragon than Yanma at least. Unfortunately for you dragon type Yanma and Yanmega fans, there's nothing dragon here about them. They don't learn a single proper dragon type move nor have dragon related abilities. It's just a dragonfly and a prehistoric giant dragonfly. If they wanted to do it, they had more than 20 years to change Yanma and almost 20 years to do anything dragon with Yanmega. Sorry y'all, they're both just mostly bug and flying. Yanmega is a little more proficient with flying. I'm doing a few more honorable mentions, but rapid fire because I don't have much to say about them, but I'm sure people would bring them up. Umbreon is mostly dark type, but it sweats poison and has moon powers. Might have been a poison type in development, who knows. Might still have Eevee's unstable DNA. That's it, just an obligatory mention. Obligatory mention of Beta Girafarig being part dark because it used to be dark normal type in the 1997 demo of Pokemon Gold and Silver. Obligatory mention of Dunsparce being some kind of latent dragon, flying, ground, or bug version of the Japanese Nozuchi or Tsuchinoko. Obligatory mention of Hisuian Quillfish and Overquill being dark poison type, aquatic creatures with latent water typings that over time became a less sinister water poison fish. Obligatory mention of Weavile, Sneasler, and the Sneasels. They all live in icy areas and hunt outside of them too. Their typing reflects their difference in habit and strategy, and they should probably get their own trivia video. Obligatory mention of Shuckle's strong digestive fluids that enable its signature fermentation themes and poison moves. Here's an interesting one. Steelix. I originally didn't expect to be bringing up Onix and Steelix because how I saw it, it was just swapping one type for another. We know that it goes from the rock and ground type Onix to the steel and ground type Steelix. Same principle as Scyther to Scizor, which we already covered. We already got the gist, and if there's not much to say, it doesn't make sense to force the topic to me. Well, then I started reading, and as Pokemon usually does, they add some details with odd ramifications. In the wild, Onix needs to ingest enough trace metals in the soil as it burrows. Then the heat and pressure help its body change over years. Allegedly, this can take as much as 100 years, assuming the Pokedex isn't exaggerating as usual. That's insane, especially considering that's 100 years of life to evolve into a Steelix, and then going on to live however many years more out in the wild. In captivity, all that is needed is that dinky little metal coat item. That stands out to me because wouldn't you need way more metal than the metal coat has in it? Is that 100 years worth of metals in a tiny CeraVe skin cream container? Are we for real? It may not look like it, but the metal coat is a metal container with what looks like a spreadable metal substance, maybe a ferrofluid. If it is a ferrofluid, it's got less metal because a fluid would be using up precious space to suspend the metal particles. That's not a lot of metal to work with. Maybe it's enough to coat something like a Scyther, but the 28-foot-long Onix? Maybe Onix doesn't need that much metal to evolve. Steelix is only 2 feet longer, not that much more volume, and only double the weight. The math isn't exact, but the average difference in density for generic hard boulders and steel should make Steelix about 3 times heavier, or at least closer to 2.5 times heavier if we are extremely generous. Again, rough math based on similar size and volume, and similar hollow space for organs and digestive tract. When we make all of those similar, we can cancel out variables we don't know and just compare density. So maybe Onix and Steelix are both semi-hollow boulders of hard stone filled with soil that acts as material being digested and as a muddy bloodstream. Steelix would then have a coat that from the inside to out forms a gradient of hard stone to hard steel. The soil on the inside still grounds the Pokemon, but the metal exterior gives the steel defensive profile. What I'm getting at here is that Steelix could be just barely more steel than rock as opposed to outright replacing all the rock with steel like I would have originally assumed. Something like 34% steel, 34% ground, and 32% rock. Again, the numbers are more to demonstrate the point, but if we take the information at face value as true, those are some interesting ramifications. Mega Steelix, when we compare the weight change and length change, actually reaches the 2.5 to 3 times more dense than Onix, threshold we would have expected to see from an Onix that replaces all rock with steel to evolve into a regular Steelix. This expected weight change, even factoring in that they are exposed sections of just crystal, is comfortably in a range where everything else could be solid steel replacing rock internally, which is pretty cool. Who knows? Since Mega Evolution historically causes suffering and temporarily mutilates a Pokemon's body, some organs and fascia could be converted into steel or compressed inwards to make room inside to thicken the steel shell internally. I don't know if those crystal spikes are a solid crystal or a mega crystal or diamond coating the metal spikes, so maybe a Mega Steelix could shoot up to as much as, if not more than, 65% steel, 25% ground, and 10% rock as a ballpark composition. Again, rough math based on what we know, but this explains the weight changes compared to size based on what we are given. Of course, the straightforward and boring answer is probably just that Game Freak didn't think about that, and the Pokedex numbers given are arbitrary and useless as usual. After all, Aggron is another rock type with steel type coverings. Despite being only around 7 feet tall, it is almost as heavy as the base form Steelix, which is insane. Even if we assume Aggron is entirely metal with a really thin rock skin, and the metal armor is the insides poking out, it's still pushing the limits of suspending disbelief. I'm getting ahead of myself. I should address Aggron in the Generation 3 episode of this series. The point is that there are interesting ramifications when we take Game Freak's information at face value, as much as we probably shouldn't. Now we talk about the legendary Johto Beast trio, or rather mostly Suicune. At this point, we should all be pretty familiar with the Ho-Oh lore. Brass Tower is struck with lightning, burns down, and rain puts out the fire. Pokemon die inside, Ho-Oh revives them, and they become these three beasts. Then a bunch of theories about what Pokemon they originally were float around. Raikou and Entei are firmly just about their own elements. Raikou is electric type, it's the thunder Pokemon, and looks lightning themed. The games and media don't overhype adjacent type things with flying wind powers like they do with Thundurus, or any steel magnetism powers like with the Magnemite lines. Entei is treated similarly by just being fire type and the Volcano Pokemon. Now I get that Volcano might arguably bring up ideas of being rock or ground related, but this is definitely just the trope where volcanoes, lava, and magma are just fire, and that's okay. Suicune differs in the mixed messaging. Suicune is a pure water type, yet they include a lot of flying and ice typed moves and themes into it. It comes with the territory because water can be a vapor, liquid, or solid. It's constantly associated with Aurora and the North Wind. Even locations and spin-offs choose to put it in places named after ice or the North Wind, compared to Raikou and Entei, who live almost exclusively in lightning or fire named places. Suicune also has ice and flying coverage alongside its water moves. Not just generic ice coverage moves everyone gets like Ice Beam or Blizzard, it gets sheer cold. Suicune is a great example of how something can just go wild with themes without needing to take on an existing type. Water alone covers these ice and air themes without needing to be ice or flying type proper. To the surprise of probably no one, Suicune has a pie chart where it's mostly water, but ice and flying are tied, so there is no second most dominant type. It's Suicune. It just had to be addressed, you know? Lugia has water on the pie chart. We all knew it was coming. Moving on from that, Lugia has a very complicated history like a lot of early Pokemon. Gold and Silver were going to be the sequel to end Pokemania on a high note. A mostly white bird dragon that lives underwater sounds Shinto as all hell. Psychic typed because that was our impactful thematic type back then for unexplained magic and enlightenment. Flying typed because it's winged and flies. Water themed because water is just a tool. Water is the origin and enabler of life as we know it, and where life begins as we know it. Lugia at a point was allegedly designed to be the creator of all life on Earth, because it was made specifically for the second Pokemon movie. It's pretty interesting because even though Lugia and Ho-Oh are completely recontextualized in modern day, they were the start of Pokemon approaching their in-universe creationism. In a way, Lugia represented the start of life and the incubation needed to begin and foster life. Ho-Oh then represented the persistence, passion, adaptation, and cycles of death and rebirth for life. The silver bird grants a soul and the golden bird tempers the heart. Even though the Pokemon world quickly expanded to explicitly have creators of wisdom, emotion, willpower, space, time, antimatter, or gravity, and even existence itself, it's really cool what themes they tried to cover in Johto. Funny how contexts and plans change when your media takes off, and you suddenly need to account for further growth. Finally, it's time for Celebi. It's a fairy. We didn't have fairy in the past, and it never got changed when a fairy was added. It has life, nature, and time magic. Life and nature magic are covered in grass and fairy in the modern day. Back then, magic powers that don't have a type used to just be thrown into psychic. Time travel is still not a type, and still more of a non-elemental ability, well, unless Dialga has some latent psychic typing, which would be a problem for future me to deal with. Shout out to future me. I really appreciate you, my guy. There's not much to say. We already thought this, but it's Celebi. It has to be brought up. As expected, this was long and ended up covering more than the 12 or so I assumed I'd talk about. There always ends up being some detail I read about that just becomes a rabbit hole of information that overcomplicates things. You can see why I don't want to cover every single Pokemon. Like I said last time, the principles and interpretations of this thought experiment can be applied to any Pokemon. We kind of have a mutual understanding that covering the highlights is the compromise that works out best for me and you. At the end of the day, the pie chart is just a visual tool to give a ballpark estimate of what types are going on with the Pokemon. It's absolutely not exact or official metrics. Next time, we will cover some Generation 3 Pokemon. Crossing my fingers it doesn't balloon like usual. Tell me your favorite Johto Pokemon, even if the evolution or form was added in a different region. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you some other time. Bye!